keep on going. All right. So today we're in James still, at the end of chapter 4. So if you've got your Bible with you, please turn to James chapter 4, verses 13 and 17. That's James chapter 4, verses 13 and 17. Now, it might be a small passage, the one we're looking at today, but there is a lot in it. And as James is starting to come to a close in his letter, he's building upon a lot of themes that we've already come across so far. Themes such as, if you say that you believe in Jesus Christ as you should, then why does your life not look like it should? Why do you do the things that you shouldn't? And then we can encapsulate this further when we say that James is really saying that you should live as I say and live as I do is the example that we should be setting towards other people in our lives. And we've been talking a lot about how our walk with Jesus is a walk, and we're trying to picture ourselves in this mindset that Jesus Christ is living and breathing right beside us. And that's how we should be walking our life every single day. And the title for today's sermon is, The Walk is More Important Than the Destination. The walk is more important than the destination. And hopefully by the end of today's sermon, you'll feel exactly the same way. Okay. So I'll start by reading the passage, and then we'll get into it. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. Now, in May 2016, I was in a terrible car accident. And on that day, I went to work just like every other day. And I suspect that I had a pretty bad day at work. And I know this because when I reflect on that day, I remember just before starting the car, calling up my wife, Sarah, and saying, I'm on my way home. Is it okay if I leave you on the speaker? I want to have a chat to you as I'm driving, And I know that back then, it was my way I would do that because I had had a bad day and I wanted to talk to my wife and I wanted to debrief with her on the way home and, talk about all the things that had gone on that day. So as I drove off from work, I had Sarah on speaker and she was went about my drive, drove past Yellow Water Shopping Centre, drove past Harbour Bay Baptist Church, and I turned left down Chapel Road. And as I was driving down Chapel Road, I got this sense in myself that Sarah wasn't there. When you have a conversation with someone, you're on the phone, you're talking to them, you just think, they're not there anymore. Something's gone wrong. Sure enough, I looked down at my phone and the call had hung up. So here I am, not really looking up at the road. I'm trying to get this call back. And I remember just pushing these buttons and for some reason I couldn't get this call back. Must have been tired. I wasn't thinking too clearly. And then I had this prompting that, hang on, you've been looking down too long. You should probably look up. And I look up. And sure enough, I've drifted into the opposite side of the road. And there is a white ute, sizable ute, coming towards me, right at me. And at the same time as I'm performing this massive emergency maneuver and turning the wheel of my car, I remember thinking to myself at the time, I have seriously stuffed up. And that's the polite way of saying it. I've seriously stuffed up and now I'm going to die. And after that, it gets very hazy. And it's still hazy despite all the psychological work I've had done after this accident. But what I do remember is I'm waking up and I'm upside down, covered in glass, and there's this voice bringing me back to consciousness, asking me how I am, asking me what's happening, how I'm feeling. And then all of a sudden, this mind-blowing pain just rips through my body. And they start to see that I go in the shock, and they're trying to calm me down and asking me, where does it hurt? I'm like, my leg, my arm, just listing off pretty much everywhere in my body where it hurts. I feel blood going down my face. I start feeling cold. So I'm having trouble breathing. I'm all tight. I'm all compressed. I'm just in a haze trying to work out what's happened to me. And I remember this cannula going in, and then that's it. I completely lose consciousness. And then I wake up in a hospital bed. I can't really talk. I'm really hazy. And my wife Sarah and I had watched some program just before this happened, a couple of days before. And we must have both been in tune, and we both remember that, in this program, the person couldn't talk, but they would blink or something, and then they get to a certain letter, and then that's how they could form words, and they could have a conversation. So we start doing that. And Sarah must have been really intuitively thinking at the time the sort of questions that I might want to ask. So she starts answering my questions like, well, what happened? She said, you had a really bad car accident. You flipped the car, driver's side completely crumpled in. You were sitting where the gear shift was, and the gear shift was sitting where the passenger side was. So it took over 2 hours to get you out of the car. I'm like, well, am I okay? She's like, you broke your leg, broke your arm, you hit your head pretty bad. I had to staple up the sutures, staple up the scar. You were in a coma for 24 hours. They medically induced you into a coma. You're in surgery for over 8 hours just to fix your broken leg and your broken arm. And it was at that moment that it hit me that God had saved my life. There's something so horrific, so terrible that was being described to me. There was no doubt in my mind that he had saved me, that he had decided not to remove me from the face of the earth and take me to heaven, but to leave me here instead. I didn't know why, but I knew that he'd saved my life. And this is what is so interesting about verse 13 and verse 14. Because at the start of my drive, I was very much like this verse. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engaged in business and make a profit. I was very much of the mindset that that night would be like every other night that I drove home, that I would come home to my 5-month-old son, and I would come home to my wife, and I would give them a hug, and I would give them a kiss, and we'd have dinner, and we'd spend time together, and I would go to sleep, and the very next day I would go to work, and it would just keep repeating like a cycle. But at that point, I very much had the realization of what verse 14 was talking about. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. When you put some water on the boil on the that's the one, your stove, and you watch the steam come up, it's not there very long, is it? It just quickly disappears like that into the air. And that's what James is saying, that your time here on earth is short in respect to your eternal destiny. You're only here for a very short time. And that's something that's very important to be mindful of. So, I would love to say that at that point that I fully got God's sovereignty in my life and that I stopped being a verse 13 and I stopped saying, come now, you who say, today, tomorrow we'll go and do such and such a thing. No. Because I remember lying in the hospital bed after a week thinking to myself, they haven't really come to me and they haven't really said to me the plan, as in the plan of how do I get out of this hospital bed? So I remember asking the nurse, what do I have to do to get out of this hospital bed? And she said, well, you've got to walk a certain distance with the crutch, and they're going to take you down to the physio area, and you're going to walk up some stairs and do a couple other things. If they can do all that, you get to go home. I'm like, right, good, done. 24 hours later, I'm out of the hospital. I'm like, yes, mission accomplished. And that was my mindset for quite a long time. And when I say a long time, probably the next 18 months of my journey after this car accident. And it wasn't an easy journey. See, my mindset was, I know about fractures. It'll take about 6 weeks to heal. Do my exercises. I do what I have to do to get back to work. And funnily enough, my boss at the time was also a Christian. His mindset was exactly the same. He would tell all my patients, they'll be back in a few weeks. There's only a couple of fractures. They'll get healed and they'll be fixed. But then my physio said to me, you're not progressing the way that we need you to progress. You now need to go and actually do some physical rehabilitation in a rehabilitation unit for a few weeks to get you right. I'm like, okay, small hurdle. But then the hurdles just got bigger because as soon as I get to rehab, they work out I've got acquired brain injury. They would ask me simple things like, why does the squeaky wheel get all the grease? And I would say something, well, the squeaky wheel gets all the grease because it's squeaking and then you put the grease on it and it makes it better. It's a very literal interpretation. What they're actually saying is the person who makes up the most noise gets the most attention. Figurative response. I'd completely lost all of my abstract thinking. And you can imagine as a doctor, it's somewhat important that you have abstract thinking. So then the doctors come and tell me, sorry, we have to go tell APRA that you're not fit to be a doctor at the moment because you've had a brain injury. But don't worry, all you have to do is have a neurocognitive assessment that rules you fit to return to work, and it'll be okay. All right, good. But then another hurdle came along, and that was I started to have nightmares and flashbacks and reliving my car accident if it was real. A condition called post-traumatic stress disorder. And I get all the way down to this appointment for this neurocognitive assessment, thinking to myself, I'll just do this neurocog assessment and I'll be passed. And they tell me, we can't do a neurocognitive assessment on you because your post-traumatic stress disorder is so severe that right now we wouldn't be able to know if your cognitive deficits were because of that or because of your brain injury. And I remember seeing that car being absolutely devastated, that there was just no control that I had anymore in my destination, in my walk, in my life. At that point, it was gone. I was at the mercy of when other people would say that I was fit to return to my job. And this, of course, just spiraled into worsening depression and worsening PTSD. So then they sent me off to a 3-month intensive course with lots of group therapy and lots of one-on-one therapy. You do that for 12 weeks. And sure enough, my PTSD recovered quite significantly. But then, remember how I said I fractured my arm? Well, it never healed. For 12 months, I still had a fracture in my arm. The plate that they put in was the wrong size, and only half of my arm fracture healed. So as a result, every single time my arm moved, if it was still fractured, it would still hurt. There would still be pain. So then I got down again because I'm like, well, this is just one more step back. Finally get the PTSD sorted out a little bit, and now all of a sudden my physical stuff comes into play. So I have the surgery to put a rod in my arm, which to this day is still there. And then I get a frozen shoulder. Suddenly I'm dropping things. I've got pins and needles in my hand. I've got this deep-seated ache that goes all the way down my arm. I said, well, this is a complication of the surgery. Now you're going to have another surgery to fix your shoulder, to fix all this up. And after 18 months of all these setbacks, I'm a little bit slow on the uptake sometimes. I did some reflection. And this is what verse 15 and 16 are talking about. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Up until that point, I was very much of the mindset that if I did such and such, I would get better. If I did such and such, I would be approved to go back to work. All I had to do was walk a path which I had predetermined with its own checklists and its own tick boxes, and then I would get to the destination that I wanted, to return back to work. But all the way along the path, it just didn't work out. There were too many things that I couldn't control. And that's when I reflected, I realized that if the Lord, I can't heal a fracture in my arm. I don't have the power to do that. But one person does. If the Lord willed for my arm to be healed, it would be healed. If the Lord willed for my post-traumatic stress disorder to be removed, it would happen. If the Lord willed for me to have regained my faculties so that I could work as a doctor, it would happen. If the Lord willed for me to have a neurocognitive assessment pass, and by the way, I had to do it twice, it would happen. If the Lord willed for me to be a doctor again, it would happen. And the key is I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with that. It's not enough to say to yourself, if the Lord wills, then we will do such and such. You have to be okay with whatever the Lord wills for your life. That is the key, because that is acceptance. And acceptance is a very long and difficult journey. 18 months is a long time to keep getting hit with the same message over and over and over again until you make the connection that it's not just that the Lord is in control, but that you're okay with that, regardless of whatever the outcome will be. And Jesus shows us this towards the end of the Garden of Gethsemane. He's walked faithfully for 3 years. He knows what his destination is, the cross. He's under no illusions as to what's going to happen there. He's already told his disciples for the last couple of years what's going to go down. They didn't get it, but he still told them. And while he's in the garden crying tears of blood, he describes that this cup, this destiny that awaits him, how he wishes he could get rid of it. They wouldn't have to actually go through with it because he knows what's going to happen. But then he says, not my will be done, your will be done. Jesus' own walk with God is an example that we should all follow. It doesn't, when we're walking with Jesus and we're walking towards his destinations and his plans for our lives, no matter how hard it is, no matter how tough it is, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, the example of Jesus shines through for us. That it's not my will be done, it's your will be done to the very end. This is why I say the walk is more important than the destination. How we walk with Jesus is more important than the destination we get to because of Jesus. As Christians, we get into this state of mind where And we've been talking a lot about that little bubble of values and that bigger bubble of beliefs, and the next bigger one of attitudes, the next bigger one of behaviors. And we always get stuck when we're like, I value Jesus. I value what he's done for me on the cross. I love what he's done for me on the cross. I believe that he died for the forgiveness of my sins. I believe that he's died so that I can be made perfect in the eyes of God. And James has been challenging us throughout this book about how, well, you say these things as you should, but then your attitudes and behaviors towards others don't look anything like Jesus. Yet these are all the things that you believe about Jesus. You should be walking with Jesus, and they should be looking like. Your life should be looking like the same attitudes and behaviors as Jesus. And as Christians, we get stuck on this idea that about the person who got us there, Jesus. We completely forget about the fact that we entered into this master bondservant relationship where he provides us everything we need, and we're okay with not getting everything we want. We're just content that we have everything that we need. And as his bondservants, that we're going to walk with him faithfully in spirit and truth, doing his will, doing what he has planned for us in our lives. But we just tend to forget about that. We tend to focus on the destination and not think about the walking bit. And the walking bit is very important. We see this in Matthew 7. I've used this passage from the Beatitudes a lot lately because it's so important. Because Jesus says, not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, is going to be saved. The confession isn't enough. And he goes further when he says that many people are going to say that, but I did all these things in your name. The problem is, we can do things in his name that aren't his will for our lives or for the lives of those around us. And the scary thing is that without the relationship component, the walk, that ongoing day-to-day authentic walk, Jesus might look at us and say, I never knew you. I never knew you. It's emphasizing relationship. It's emphasizing the fact that he has to know us. He has to say, wow, we walked together. You remember that time we were walking together and said, that person doesn't know Jesus. Go and talk to them. Go and tell me. Go and tell them about me. Remember that time I said, you need to stop that job, or you need to move house, or you need to go to a different location, or you need to go on a mission or something. And you listen to me. And look at all the stuff that I did for you. It's a relationship. It's a journey that we have together in life. And to highlight it further, doing the will of God while we walk with Jesus is also important. We're talking a lot lately about this idea of Christian mindfulness. And again, the video is up on the website. But the idea that we're mindful that he's always there, he's always present, as if he's actually living and breathing right beside us, and that we're walking together, mindful of that. And we see this plot in the parable, there's talents. We hear the story of there's a master and he's got 3 servants. And the master says to the one servant, here's 5 talents. He says to the other servant, here's 2 talents. And he says to the other one, here's one talent. And then the master disappears. And what the parable shows us is he's present even if we can't see him. Because the servant that had the 5 talents, when the master comes back, he's got 5 more. He was mindful the whole time of what the master's will in his life was and what he wanted him to do. The one with 2 talents got 2 more talents. Again, mindful of the fact that the master was still had a will for him and a desire for him and a path to walk and a destination, and he lived it out. But then what about the one who had the 1 talent? He buried it. He didn't do anything. He wasn't mindful of at all that the master was still had a will for him and a path for him and a plan, and he had to walk a certain way and towards a certain destination that the master set before him. He completely forgot about the master once the master disappeared. He buried his tail on the ground and did whatever he wanted. And then what happens? It doesn't end very well for the servant with the one talent, emphasizing the fact that, again, doing the will of while we walk with Jesus is very, very important. Again, emphasizing the fact that the walk is more important than the destination. How you walk with Jesus on a day-to-day basis is more important than your own walk, your own path, your own destinations, or even the destination that you're trying to get to while walking the path of righteousness. If you don't walk the path of righteousness with Jesus, it doesn't matter where the path of righteousness goes, you're not heading there. You're not going to the destination. The walking bit is the bit that gets you to the destination. As James tells us, we could die at any moment. So the question I ask you is, why are you still living here now? Why are you still here? Because the Lord wills it. That's why. He has a purpose behind why you're still alive. He has a plan for you. He has things that he wants to do through you still and through the lives of others around you. You have to ask yourself, why are you still here? It's not to walk your own path. It's not to walk your own destinations. It's to walk the path of righteousness with Jesus. To walk the destination that he set before you. To do his will. So who is in your life right now? Who is in your life right now that God is putting there for a reason? Sometimes we get stuck in the mindset that the reason I work a certain job, or I live in a certain town, or a certain location, it's because that job provides, that's how God provides for me through my job. But we have to think more broadly than that. God has put you where he's put you because there's people he wants you to reach. He doesn't want you to have superficial conversations with people. He wants you to have meaningful conversations with people. There's a reason why he's put them in your life, because he wants to work through you to get into their hearts and into their minds and to reach them with the gospel. He wants you to have meaningful relationships, because from meaningful relationships is where spiritual conversations come from. The sort of conversations where it's all of a sudden, here's this guy. I walk with him every day. He's called Jesus. He's changed my life. We do things together. He tells me what his will is in my life, and it's way better than anything I could come up with. He loves me. He shows me mercy. He's made me perfect in the eyes of God. He's completely transformed my life. Let me tell you about him, because he's very, very important to me. What are his plans for your life? I'm always in awe of a decision that Francis Chan made with his wife when they prayed to find out what God's will for their life was. And he sells his house and he goes to Southeast Asia and does mission work. That is the definition of getting uncomfortable and living out the Lord's will in your life. That is huge. So what are God's plans for your life? Are you too comfortable? Open it up. Put it all out on the table and say, God, is this the house for me? Is this the amount of comfort for me? Is this too much? Do I need to shed some? Is this the ministry you want me to do? Is this the church you want me to attend? Is this the location you want me to live? Is this the job you want me to work? Lay it all out. Say, God, what is your will? Not my will. What is your will? What does he want you to change in your life? The walk is far more important than the destination. It's far more important. Journey with Jesus. Walk with him. Wherever he wants to walk with you, just walk with him. That's what he wants you to do. That's how he wants you to live your life. Stop your own walk. Stop walking to your own destination. Stop walking to your own plans. And walk with him in life. That's us. That's all he asks. So walk with me. He goes up to people in the New Testament and they're fishing. And he says, walk with me. And they give it all up. Their income, their job, their life meaning, all of it. And they walk with him. That's all he wants. He just wants you to walk with him in love and in faith and in truth. And just keep walking with him every day, faithfully down that path of righteousness. Don't worry about the destination. Don't worry about where he's walking you to. Just walk with him. Let him into your life and just see him at work in your life and in the lives of others. See his will being done in your life and the lives of others.